that Yerevan is moving away from Russia. Armenia is upset over Moscow's lack of support as tensions spike with neighbor Azerbaijan. France will not withdraw its troops from Niger. The French president refuses the junta's demand. Emmanuel Macron says he does not recognize their legitimacy. Around 1,500 French troops are stationed in Niger. The junta has accused Paris of planning a military intervention. In India, the markets cheer after the success of the G20 Summit. The Nifty hits the 20,000 mark for the first time ever. It gained for the 7th consecutive day. India's benchmark share market indices have outperformed overseas peers. And he's 36, going on 24. Novak Djokovic beats Daniil Medvedev to win the US Open. The 36-year-old now has 24 Grand Slam titles, the most by any player in the history of tennis. Djokovic has equaled Margaret Court's record.
मैं G20 समिट के समापन की घोषणा करता हूं।
The G20 is done and dusted. All the leaders are back home after a hectic weekend. Well, not all of them. 2 leaders are still in New Delhi, one by choice, the other because his plane is grounded. The first leader is Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He stayed on in New Delhi for a state visit. And the second, we'll tell you about him later on the show. Today, India rolled out the red carpet for MBS. Like I said, it was a state visit, so the day began with a ceremonial welcome at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, that's the President's house. Prime Minister Modi and President Murmu greeted MBS. He then inspected a guard of honor. With the ceremony done, it was time for business. First, Modi and MBS held talks, their one-on-one talks, what we call the bilateral. Afterwards, they participated in the India-Saudi Arabia Strategic Partnership Council. It was announced back in 2019, but the first meeting was held only today. Prime Minister Modi called Riyadh one of India's most important partners. He also praised the recently announced economic corridor. Listen to this.
भारत के लिए सऊदी अरब हमारे सबसे महत्वपूर्ण स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनर में से एक है। कल हमने मिलकर भारत, पश्चिम एशिया और यूरोप के बीच इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर स्थापित करने के लिए ऐतिहासिक शुरुआत की है। इसी कॉरिडोर से केवल दोनों देशों ही आपस में नहीं जोड़ेगा, परंतु एशिया, पश्चिम एशिया और यूरोप के बीच आर्थिक सहयोग, ऊर्जा के विकास और डिजिटल कनेक्टिविटी को बल देगा।
With that, the business was done. It was time for more ceremony. The Crown Prince headed to Rashtrapati Bhavan once again. He called on President Murmu. The President is hosting a special dinner for MBS. It's part of every state visit. It begins with a welcome at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. It ends with a dinner also at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Later tonight, MBS will board the flight back home, which raises the big question. What has this visit achieved? India says around 8 agreements have been signed. They cover a number of sectors like energy, digitization and manufacturing. In addition, over 24 MOUs were signed by Indian and Saudi companies. MOUs are memorandums of understanding. They're not legally binding, but they detail what the plans are. Most of the talk is around 2 projects. One is for an underwater grid. Cables will reportedly be laid below the sea. They will connect India and Saudi Arabia in a renewable grid. The second is related to investments. Saudi Arabia has promised around $100 billion in investments. Around half of that is for a refinery, the West Coast refinery. This project was announced back in 2015, but it's been delayed repeatedly. So New Delhi and Riyadh are setting up a joint task force. It will identify and accelerate investments. So these are the tangible results. Beyond these, Modi and MBS discussed multiple issues like trading in local currency. India has already been doing this with the United Arab Emirates, so Saudi Arabia is the natural next step. Also on the agenda was trade. India is looking to sign a free trade agreement with the GCC. GCC is the Gulf Cooperation Council. It has 6 members, including Saudi Arabia. And if you get Riyadh on board, the rest becomes quite easy. Which brings us to bilateral trade. India-Saudi Arabia trade is at an all-time high. It was around $52 billion last year. Most of it, of course, was oil. Riyadh is the 3rd biggest seller of oil to India. The first is Russia, the second is Iraq. So oil and energy remain the cornerstone of this relationship. But that alone is not enough. Both Modi and MBS realize this. You see, India and Saudi Arabia are the 2 fastest growing major economies of the world. They have money, they have a skilled young labor force, they also have a history of cooperating. So we need to diversify beyond oil. The Crown Prince has already unveiled his plan for an oil-free Saudi. It is called Vision 2030. India is well placed to capitalize on that, with investments, with jobs, and with more trade. The new economic corridor is a great example of that, of thinking beyond oil. The Crown Prince alluded to these initiatives. He also said there are no disagreements between India and Saudi Arabia. Listen to this.
Relations between Arabs and Indians, between Saudi Arabia also and India, beneficial relations for both countries. There was no disagreement at all during the history of this relationship, but there is cooperation to build the future of our country and create opportunities. Today we're working on the future opportunities. There is a huge agenda to be working with. We are working through this council to achieve these accomplishments, and these are promising.
India shares a unique relationship with the Arab states. On the one hand, you have a history of close relations. Most of them have been India's key trade partners. On the other, they can't seem to abandon Pakistan. Each time Pakistan fails, the Arab world rescues them. And this time is no different. Pakistan says Riyadh is planning to invest $25 billion in the country. It's not been confirmed yet. But if this is true, it tells you how deep their relationship is. So should India be worried about that? Well, the thing is, worrying will not get you very far. Instead, it's important to focus on what is possible. The Saudi-Pakistan relationship is more emotional. The Saudi-India relationship has more substance. And from the looks of it, Riyadh realizes this. One of the big announcements at the G20 Summit came from the sidelines. A new alliance was announced and a brand new infrastructure project was unveiled. The EU Middle East India Corridor. It's an ambitious plan, to say the least, a way to challenge China's Belt and Road, or BRI. It's been called the modern day spice route.
आने वाले समय में यह भारत, पश्चिम एशिया और यूरोप के बीच इकोनॉमिक इंटीग्रेशन का प्रभावी माध्यम होगा। यह पूरे विश्व में कनेक्टिविटी और विकास को सस्टेनेबल दिशा प्रदान करेगा।
The corridor links Europe, West Asia and India. How? Through a series of railways and ports. The stakeholders include India, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the European Union, France, Italy, Germany and the United States.
Key part of this corridor, we're going to invest in ships and rail that extends from India all the way to Europe, connected by the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Israel. Bridging ports across 2 continents, unlocking endless opportunities, including making it far easier to trade, export clean energy.
So how does it work? The project will connect rail and port facilities across West Asia. It will basically be the connecting link. This will help speed up trade between India and Europe. By some estimates, it will be 40% faster.
This is nothing but historic. It will be the most direct connection to date between India, the Arabian Gulf, and Europe, with a rail link that will make trade between India and Europe 40% faster.
40% faster, she said. I know it sounds complicated. So let me pull up a map for you. Imagine there's a shipping container traveling from Mumbai to Europe. Right now, today, it will have to go through the Suez Canal. You can see it on the map. That's the route it will take right now. 10% of global maritime trade goes through the Suez Canal. And this means it can get quite crowded. The Suez Canal is a huge bottleneck for trade, which brings us to this new route that these countries are proposing. Let's pull up the map for that too. The same shipment can go from Mumbai to Dubai by sea, and from there, from Dubai, it can go on to Haifa on rail. Haifa is in Israel, passing through cities like Riyadh, and finally on to Europe by sea again. This is the new route they're proposing. It saves time, it saves money, plus there are no bottlenecks. Basically, it's a win-win for all.
And this is a very important project from Asia through Middle East to Europe to offer big opportunities and connect people. But our intention is as well to make it real and to be sure that after this commitment, we have concrete results.
So why is this project so important? First, it cuts down travel time and cost, like I said. The East Corridor connects India to the Arabian Gulf. The North Corridor connects the Arabian Gulf to Europe. So it's like a bridge between the two continents. Second, this route makes it easier to export clean energy, also expand access to clean electricity. Third, the members want to lay a cable for energy and digital connectivity. And last, it will safeguard regional supply chains and boost accessibility, thus creating more jobs across the region. So that's all about the plan. But what about the implementation? The members have already signed an MOU. Like I said, that's a memorandum of understanding. They plan on meeting in the next 60 days. That's when they will chart out the future course. And there will be an action plan with a timetable. So there's a long way to go, really. But this corridor is not just about trade and relations, it's also about countering China. The corridor is an alternative to the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. It is Xi Jinping's pet project, and it is losing steam. The debt is unsustainable. Countries like Italy are planning to walk out of BRI, and this was apparently conveyed during the G20 Summit. Reports suggest that the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, privately signaled this to the Chinese Premier Li Qiang. But Meloni has not said anything publicly yet. Even in a press conference, she said that the decision is yet to be taken.
The issue is how to guarantee a partnership that is beneficial for both the sides, leaving aside the decision that we will take on the BRI.
So China's BRI is losing its sheen, its partners are jumping ship. It now has a credible challenger in West Asia. Or does it? Has China's Silk Road finally met its match in this modern-day spice route? We say it all depends on the implementation. Our next story is about Justin Trudeau. His trip to India has been disastrous. A textbook example of Murphy's Law. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong. That's Murphy's Law, and that's the story of Justin Trudeau's India visit. First, he was pulled up by the Indian Prime Minister, the Indian leadership. Then he could not fly back home. He was supposed to leave on Sunday, but his plane broke down. It's Monday night in New Delhi now, and the Canadian delegation is still here. They've not been able to fix the plane and go back home. And I'm guessing they're not in a hurry, because when they land in Canada, they will meet a flood of criticism. International media in general, and the Canadian media in particular, have been unsparing. I'll show you some examples. The Toronto Sun on Sunday, this is what they said. This way out, Trudeau finds he has few friends in India. Now look at Bloomberg. Trudeau is stuck in India with faulty aircraft after hearing criticism from Modi. Then we come to Reuters. This is what they've said. Modi scolds Trudeau over Sikh protests in Canada against India. It was quite bad, but hardly surprising. The India-Canada relationship has hit rock bottom, and Trudeau only has himself to blame for this. His politics is poisoning the relationship. He has given Khalistanis a free run in Canada. This year, on 2 separate occasions, India summoned the Canadian High Commissioner in New Delhi, and on both occasions over the same issue, Khalistan. Canada refuses to act against Khalistani terrorists on its soil. India condemns this inaction. Yesterday, on the sidelines of the G20 Summit, the issue came up again. Prime Minister Modi conveyed his displeasure personally. He met the Canadian PM briefly for barely 15 minutes. And Prime Minister Modi did not mince his words. He said, there are extremists in Canada. They're indulging in separatist activities and inciting violence against Indian diplomats. They're damaging India's diplomatic premises and threatening the Indian community. Prime Minister Modi also conveyed that these separatists have links to organized crime, drug syndicates and human trafficking. After the meeting, Trudeau was asked about this frosty exchange. And here's what he said.
Obviously, Canada will always defend freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, freedom of peaceful protest. That's something that's extremely important to us. At the same time as we're always there to prevent violence, to push back against hatred. I think on the issue of the community, it's important to remember that the actions of the few do not represent the entire community or Canada.
You heard what he said. Canada will defend freedom of expression, as they should. This is Trudeau's go-to defense, and it holds no water in this case. Attacking Indian diplomats is not freedom of expression. Threatening to assassinate the Indian Prime Minister is not freedom of expression. Khalistanis bombed an airplane, for God's sake. They carried out the worst terror attack on Canadian soil. They took more than 300 lives. Would Prime Minister Justin Trudeau call it freedom of expression? His defense is not just tone deaf and plain wrong. It's an affront to Indian sovereignty and to common sense, if I may add. Even as he was enjoying Indian hospitality, Khalistanis were in action in Canada. On Sunday, they took to the streets of Vancouver. Reports say there was a large crowd, over 5,000 people, according to some accounts. And they were being led by this man, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, a Khalistani terrorist and a spokesperson of a group called Sikhs for Justice. India has banned this group. The government of India has designated this man as a terrorist. But the government of Canada, under Justin Trudeau, gives him a free rein. He operates freely in Canada. Take a look.
This is a message to those who assassinated Niger. We are calling for your political death. Asi karange thoda rajsi qatl. Modi, Jai Shankar, Dawal, Shah, we are coming for you. We are coming with the might of the pen and we are using the international laws. Yes, we are going to challenge the territorial integrity. Yes, we are going to challenge the sovereignty. We are going to balkanize India.
In this rally, he was openly giving calls to break up India. He said, we will balkanize India. He's threatening to attack Indian leaders. He was inciting the crowd against India. And what did the Canadian authorities do? Did they stop Pannu? Did they arrest him? They did not. Instead, they are facilitating a referendum that pushes for the creation of Khalistan, that pushes for the breakup of India. And let me repeat, all of this is being facilitated by the government of Canada while their Prime Minister is still in India. No wonder they got a dressing down from Prime Minister Modi. And he's being slammed by Canada's opposition too. The country's main opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, has said, and I quote, putting partisanship aside, no one likes to see a Canadian Prime Minister repeatedly humiliated and trampled upon by the rest of the world. He shared that front page of the Toronto Times with this post. And this is not the first time that Justin Trudeau has been snubbed and scolded in India. He came for a long visit in 2018. Some of you may remember it was equally disastrous. He tried to woo India. He dressed in Indian attire, visited a temple, went to the Taj Mahal, even showed his Bhangra moves at a High Commission event. No one was impressed. The photo ops were overshadowed by a scandal. Trudeau's office invited a Khalistani for a reception. They withdrew the invite later, but by then the damage was done. Justin Trudeau had egg on his face and he admitted it. Let me quote from what he said about his 2018 visit to India. He called it, and I'm quoting, a blaring, negative, wall-to-wall international ridicule. So he knows that it was a big flop. And he has learned no lessons. In fact, he made it worse the second time, this time. And his broken down claim is perhaps the cherry on the top. Justin Trudeau, with his disastrous India policy and his appeasement of Khalistani terrorists, has become a national embarrassment for Canada. Trudeau was one of the 43 world leaders in New Delhi, which means standing out was tough. But he did. Trudeau stood out by being snubbed most of the time. And to be honest, he did not really work hard to be noticed. But one leader did. That's British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. He had high expectations from this visit. Rishi Sunak joked about how some people called him India's son-in-law. I'm sure you know why. Sunak is married to Akshata Murthy. She's the daughter of Infosys founder Narayan Murthy. So Rishi Sunak had the best shot in New Delhi. He's a Hindu Prime Minister. He has an Indian wife. And there was some good social media chatter. So how did he do? Well, according to the British press, not so well. Look at this Guardian article. Rishi who? Sunak slips down pecking order in G20 scramble. Why is the British media saying that? Sunak was apparently supposed to meet Prime Minister Modi on Friday, and that too at his home, but the meeting never happened. Instead, the Indian Prime Minister met Joe Biden at his residence on Friday, and Sunak had to wait until Saturday. He ended up meeting Modi at the summit venue. If this is true, it's certainly a setback. This was Sunak's first visit to India after taking office. He was hoping to take the country by storm. On top of his agenda was a trade deal. India and Britain have been negotiating a free trade agreement for 18 months now. London is hoping to sign one by the end of this year, by the end of 2023. Rishi Sunak and his party need this deal. They're facing a lot of criticism over a botched up Brexit. A deal with India could fix that. So what did Sunak do? Well, everything he could, really. On Sunday, he visited a Hindu temple in New Delhi. Take a look at this. I must say, great pictures, but have they translated into solid gains? Rishi Sunak got his sit down with Modi on Saturday. They did discuss the free trade deal. Let me quote what the Indian government has said. Both leaders reviewed the progress of free trade agreement negotiations and expressed hope that the remaining issues could be addressed at the earliest so that a balanced, mutually beneficial and forward-looking free trade agreement is concluded soon. This is what they said after the meeting. And this could happen soon, maybe even the next month. India is hosting the Cricket World Cup this year. The tournament will be starting next month. So there is talk of Rishi Sunak returning to India for that. Maybe even watch the India-England match. But will he also get a deal in October? That is the question. Well, his strategy seems to be clear. Temples, cricket and Indian roots. Whether they give results is a different question altogether. As for the British media, their judgment seems a bit harsh. After all, no world leader really stood out. It was more about the agenda, about the Delhi Declaration, which is why we have sketched out the 5 big takeaways from this G20, the 5 big wins for India's G20 presidency. The first, of course, is the membership for the African Union. India spearheaded this proposal. It was not just a policy idea. It was about correcting a historical wrong. New Delhi can be proud of this success, and this picture sums it up. The Indian Prime Minister embracing the President of the African Union. This was just before he took his seat at the table. And where was Xi Jinping when this happened? Not even in the room. Forget the room, not even in the country. Now to success number 2 for India, the agenda and the participation. We mentioned some of this yesterday. India's G20 Summit was attended by 43 world leaders. That's 20 national leaders, 9 guest countries, 14 heads of global agencies. This is the highest ever turnout at any G20 summit. The highest participation. The agenda was equally impressive. Look at the issues that were discussed. Climate financing, sustainable development, gender equality, cryptocurrency, reforming multilateralism and debt relief. The final Delhi Declaration was 34 pages long. India made sure that the focus was on social and economic issues, basically the G20's original mandate. Success number 3 was a focus on people-driven G20. Again, the numbers prove this. India held 220 meetings in 60 cities, 60. The idea was to take the G20 out of the national capital. Around 15 million people were involved in some manner, like in organizational work, or putting on cultural shows, or hospitality. India wanted to create a new template for G20, one that goes beyond closed-door meetings in the national capital. And the reason was quite simple. If the decisions affect people, then people should have a say in the decision-making process. India calls it democratization of the G20. It'll be interesting to see if other hosts take this forward. Now to success number 4, consensus building. It's easier said than done nowadays. Both the West and Russia came to the G20 with a fixed mindset, not an inch back. It could have very well derailed all other issues, but in the end, India forged a consensus, a statement that all countries could live with. It's important because of how divided our world is right now. The West has problems with Russia, the West also has problems with China, China has problems with Japan over the Fukushima water release, and South Korea has problems with China. In this backdrop, consensus is not easy. Which brings us to success number 5, restoring the G20's relevance and trust. Let's face it, no one has high expectations from the G20. We see a lot of bickering, a lot of political grandstanding. During the pandemic, this perception became worse. The G20 failed in vaccine deliveries. It failed to protect the global economy. So many people wondered, what's the point of it? Prime Minister Modi was aware of this problem. Listen to his remarks on day 1.
Friends, कोविड-19 के बाद विश्व में एक बहुत बड़ा संकट विश्वास के अभाव का आया है। युद्ध ने इस ट्रस्ट डेफिसिट को और गहरा किया है। आज G20 के प्रेसिडेंट के तौर पर भारत पूरी दुनिया का आह्वान करता है कि हम मिलकर सबसे पहले इस ग्लोबल ट्रस्ट डेफिसिट को एक विश्वास, एक भरोसे में बदलें। यह हम सभी के साथ मिलकर चलने का समय है।
Has that been achieved? For the most part, yes. All sides have called the summit a great success, including the Western countries and Russia. China, of course, is sulking. But either way, India has shown why the G20 is important, why it's necessary to save and expand this group. Which is why India invited guest countries from the global south, why India pushed for Africa's permanent membership. It is no secret that the G20 has problems. Its members are divided. But for all its flaws, India's presidency has shown us one thing, that the world is better off with G20 than without it. Meanwhile, in China, it's happening again. Another top minister of Xi Jinping has gone missing. This time, it's the defense minister. His name is Li Shangfu, and apparently, he has gone missing. This is according to an American diplomat, the US ambassador to Japan, Rahm Emanuel. Look at what he's posted. President Xi's cabinet lineup now resembles an Agatha Christie novel. And then there were none. Let me, in fact, quote from his post. First, Foreign Minister Qin Gang goes missing, then the rocket force commanders go missing, and now Defense Minister Li Shangfu has not been seen in public for 2 weeks. Who's going to win this unemployment race, China's youth or Xi's cabinet? There is a hashtag at the end, mystery in Beijing building. What do we make of this? First, the facts. The ambassador has got his timeline off. He says General Li has not been seen in public for 2 weeks, but his last public engagement was on the 29th of August, so not 2 weeks yet. Having said that, where is he now? Where is China's defense minister? What has Beijing said about this? Well, the standard. We are not aware of the situation. That is the response from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. We are not aware of the situation. And this is serious. Beijing's latest Houdini Act deserves a closer look because it has implications beyond China. There is a shake-up in the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, the Chinese army, and it has left Chinese forces in disarray. Let's begin with the case of Li Shangfu, the defense minister. He was last seen at an event in Beijing. It was the 3rd China-Africa Peace and Security Forum. We happen to have some pictures. General Li was the keynote speaker at this event. There were more than 100 delegates in the hall. Almost the entire African continent was represented. And this is what Li told them.
We uphold a common, neutral, cooperative and sustainable security mindset and follow a new security path of dialogue rather than confrontation, partnership rather than alliance, and win-win rather than zero-sum.
安全之路。
So he said nothing controversial. Defense Minister General Lee stuck to old talking points. He said China wants to work with Africa. He also took a subtle dig at the US. But since delivering this speech, he's been missing. Last week, President Xi Jinping inspected the PLA. He visited an army unit. China did not say exactly where, but all we know is this. Xi Jinping went to China's northeast and the Defense Minister General Lee was not with him. Someone else accompanied the president. What was the purpose of the visit? The Chinese president wanted to deliver a message. I have his statement. Listen to what he said. We must strictly enforce the education and management of troops and maintain a high degree of unity, security and stability. So a public call to improve the management of the PLA. Is this in any way linked to the defense minister and to his reported disappearance? Was Xi Jinping unhappy with him or his management of the PLA? It's hard to say and we do not wish to speculate. So let's look at some recent events. In the month of July, there was a purge in the PLA. 2 generals were sacked. These were men who led the PLA's rocket force. This department looks after China's nukes. And in this case too, Beijing followed the same playbook. First, the generals went missing, then they were sacked. Right after this shake-up, Xi Jinping made a statement. He ordered the Communist Party to maintain, quote-unquote, absolute leadership. And soon after that, an inquiry was launched. The PLA began looking into corruption cases, and these are old corruption cases, some of them more than 5 years old. The PLA's equipment department is under investigation. The cases are linked to hardware procurement. Reports say China is looking into 8 issues here. Among them is leaking information on projects and army units and helping certain companies secure bids, basically corruption. They also mention a date, October 2017. The PLA said it was investigating problems going back to October 2017. Why is this important? Guess who was leading the PLA's equipment department in October 2017? General Li Shangfu, now the missing defense minister. He led this department from September 2017 to October 2022. In 2023, that is this year, he became the defense minister of China. Is this the reason why he's gone missing? Is General Li caught up in a corruption case? We are not waiting for an answer from Beijing. It may never come. But the trajectory is quite clear. Xi Jinping seems intent on making sweeping changes to the PLA. As of June this year, China has purged more than 39 officials, including military cadres. They were put under investigation in October last year. Overall, this is Xi Jinping's 3rd cleanup campaign in the army, the 3rd in 10 years. Since he took over as president, millions of officials from different wings of the Chinese government have been purged. Millions. Now the PLA is at the receiving end for the 3rd time. So either the Chinese military is extremely corrupt or their commander-in-chief is extremely insecure. Either way, the disappearance of top ministers, first the foreign minister and now the defense minister, makes the world's 2nd largest economy look worse than a banana republic. And now let's turn our attention to the Maldives, the Asian archipelago nation. On Saturday, it voted in the much-awaited presidential election, its 4th election since 2008. 2008 is when the Maldives switched to multi-party democracy, so their democratic history is rather short. And this election was unlike any other. It is being viewed as a referendum, a vote not so much for the contestants as for the regional powers they seem to align with. We're talking about India and China. Who will have more influence in the Maldives? Unfortunately, that is how their election is being viewed. And the result was declared yesterday. No candidate managed to secure more than 50% of the vote. So the poll has now gone to a runoff. And in a surprising twist, the pro-China candidate is said to be in the lead. What does this mean for the Maldives and for the high geopolitical stakes in this region? Our next report tells you.
This is the Maldives, an Asian archipelago nation, home to over 500,000 people. The country became a multi-party democracy in 2008, and on Saturday it participated in an election. The nation's 4th presidential election, a much-awaited one at that. This election was unlike any other. It's practically a referendum over which regional power will have the biggest influence over the Maldives, India or China. Before we get to that, let's talk about the elections. Over 280,000 Maldivians were eligible to vote. The election saw a turnout of about 80%, but no candidate managed to secure more than 50% of the votes. Now the poll has gone to a runoff which will be held on September 30th. The poll saw a record 8 candidates competing against each other, but in reality, the race has been shaped by 3 presidents: the incumbent, the breakaway and the jail. The incumbent being President Ibrahim Mohammad Solih. He is seeking a record second term, but it seems quite unlikely because he only got 39% of the votes. Solih was seen as the favourite. Chances are his reputation has taken a hit, thanks to his former colleague Mohammad, the breakaway president. He became the Maldives' first democratically elected president in 2008. Today, he serves as the parliamentary speaker. Earlier this year, he quit the Maldivian Democratic Party, which increased challenges for Solih. Something that Solih's biggest contender took advantage of. We're talking about Male's mayor, Mohammad Muiz. He managed a lead in the election with about 46% of the votes. Now he will face Solih in the runoff. This is a remarkable achievement for Muiz. After all, he was a late selection. He's running from the People's National Congress. He got a chance to run after former President Abdullah Yameen was jailed. Yameen was barred from contesting following a corruption conviction. It remains to be seen if Muiz can continue this streak. If he can, it won't be good news for India. Chances are it won't be great for the Maldives either. Solih and Muiz aren't merely representing their respective parties, they're also representing 2 neighbouring countries vying for influence in the nation. Solih is perceived to be pro-India, while Muiz is seen as pro-China. During his term, Solih carried out a host of projects focused on health, education and infrastructure, many of which were backed by grants and loans from India worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So a victory for Solih will mean closer ties with New Delhi. But Muiz doesn't think this is a good thing. He doesn't support the nation's dependence on India. He's pledged to expel Indian military personnel stationed in the Maldives.
I don't believe that any other country's military force should come to our country and try to take over. So it's really bad for us.
This may not be the best thing for Maldivians, as it could return the country to authoritarianism. And that's not all. Muiz belongs to the People's National Congress. The party under jailed leader Abdullah Yameen was known for its China tilt. Yameen obtained over $1 billion in loans from Beijing, making promises that exceed the nation's economic capacity to deliver. Now their economy is strained by debt, and repayments to China are due in 2026. So it does matter who the Maldivians choose, as the new president will not only inherit economic woes, but also face high geopolitical stakes in the region. We'll have to wait for 3 weeks to know the people's verdict.
All things said, the Maldives is still a democracy, a stable country with a stable polity. But some of India's other neighbours, not so much. Just look at Pakistan. Every day brings more bad news from Pakistan. It's either the security situation or some terror attack or some constitutional crisis. Tonight, we are focusing on 2 issues from Pakistan: the external security threat and the internal political threat. Last week, there was a skirmish at Pakistan's border with Afghanistan at this place called Torkham. Both sides exchanged gunfire in the middle of the day. Take a look. No one died, but the situation is tense. This crossing is very important for both countries. Around 84% of their bilateral trade goes via Torkham. That's millions of dollars. But for 5 days, the border has been shut. Zero trade is happening. So what exactly is the problem here? Depends on which side you ask. The Taliban are blaming Pakistan. They say their border guards were repairing an old outpost and suddenly Pakistan opened fire. Islamabad disputes this. They claim a new outpost was being built on their territory. That's Pakistani territory. And Islamabad says they tried for a diplomatic solution. Instead, the Taliban started firing. So both sides are saying the exact opposite. Meanwhile, the border backlog is getting worse. Just look at these pictures. Dozens of trucks are stuck near Torkham. Some of them were carrying perishable goods like vegetables and fruits. On Sunday, the border officials met for talks. They tried to reach an agreement on reopening the border. No luck though. Torkham still remains shut. And beyond this crossing, there is a larger story here. Think back to 2021. Pakistan helped the Taliban regain power in Kabul. They lobbied for the new regime. 2 years on, relations have soured. Islamabad was hoping that Kabul will help them with the TTP, that's the Pakistani Taliban, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. But Kabul has flatly refused. In fact, they are insulting Pakistan. Look at their statement on Saturday. This is what they said. Such measures are harming the trade of Afghanistan and the region as well as the national economy of Pakistan, which is still heavily dependent on exports in the current situation. Talk about low blows. The Taliban is now mocking Pakistan. They're telling Islamabad, look at your economy. You need these exports. It's a major strategic setback for Pakistan. They supported the Taliban hoping for two major returns. One, help with the border. You see, Pakistan and Afghanistan are divided by what is called the Durand Line. That's what their border is called. Pakistan accepts the Durand Line. Afghanistan does not accept it. The hope was that the Taliban will be more compliant, maybe even accept this border. But right now, the opposite is happening. Secondly, Islamabad wanted help with the Pakistani Taliban. This group shares ethnic roots with the Afghan Taliban. They're both Pashtun outfits. But like we mentioned, Kabul is not helping. Their attitude is, your terror group, your problem. I guess it was only a matter of time because you cannot control groups like the Taliban. They do not specialize in consistent policy. Come to think of it, neither do political parties in Pakistan, no consistency. Their policies and allegiances are not based on ideology, they're based on power. Just look at the erstwhile ruling coalition. Two main parties came together, that's the PMLN and PPP. Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, PMLN, and the Pakistan People's Party. Technically, they're still allies, but right now they cannot decide when to hold elections. The PMLN says next year they want to redraw constituencies before holding elections. But the PPP appears to disagree. Listen to the party chairman, Bilawal Bhutto.
और अफसोस की बात है, हमारे बाकी सियासी जो इत्तेहादी थे, वो डर चुके हैं। वो खौफ ज्यादा है। वो बाय इलेक्शन से भागते हैं, वो बल्दियाती इलेक्शन से भागते हैं। अब शायद जनरल इलेक्शन से भागना चाहते हैं। पाकिस्तान पीपल्स पार्टी की ट्रेनिंग में नहीं है भागना।
He says his allies are scared. But not everyone in Bhutto's party is convinced. For instance, Asif Ali Zardari, his father and party president. Zardari says elections should be held next year. Bhutto and other leaders disagree. In fact, he was asked about this difference of opinion. Listen to his response. I'm bound to President Zardari in our family matters, but as far as political matters are concerned, I'm bound to follow my workers. This is what Bilawal Bhutto has said. Talk about high stakes. Over in the Sharif camp, there is more speculation. A new report says former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif will return in October, that is next month. Sharif has been living in London since 2019. He was convicted and disqualified in a corruption case. And as long as Imran Khan was in power, he had no chance of returning. But now the game has changed. Pakistan's army is betting on the Sharif brothers, Nawaz and Shehbaz. So the homecoming is being hyped up a lot. It was supposed to happen this month, but for whatever reasons, it's been delayed to October. And even that is not guaranteed. Until Nawaz Sharif's plane lands in Pakistan, anything can happen. Even afterwards, actually. Sharif has been declared an absconder by Pakistani courts. So when he returns, he must face the law. Like I said, it's all very high stakes. You have family tussles, power grabs, alliance issues, and of course, the military godfather. Our next story is from Vietnam. After the conclusion of the G20 Summit in New Delhi, US President Joe Biden took a short flight to Hanoi yesterday. He was given a grand state welcome at Vietnam's presidential palace after he landed. School children were seen waving flags, both the Vietnamese and American flags. Now, all this may seem strange to people familiar with history. We're talking about half a century ago. America and Vietnam were locked in a brutal war. Vietnamese communists were trying to unite their country. The US wanted to stop that, and they tried for almost 2 decades. Eventually, Washington's mission failed. The Vietnam War ended with the first major American military loss and an even bigger loss of face. To no one's surprise, Joe Biden was around then as well. He began his first term as US Senator back in 1973. He campaigned on an anti-war platform. He was a voice of reason back in the 70s. Looks like Hanoi remembers where he stood. So when Biden arrived, he was treated like a revered guest. But of course, this interpretation may be too idealistic. Perhaps the real reason for all this pomp and pageantry was more pragmatic, like getting American money and protection. The two sides have made an announcement. They've upgraded the level of their diplomatic relations.
President Joe Biden and I, on behalf of both countries, have jointly agreed to elevate the relation between Vietnam and the United States to a comprehensive strategic partnership for peace, cooperation, and sustainable development.
This truly historic moment. Today, we can trace a 50-year arc of progress in the relationship between our nations, from conflict to normalization to this new elevated status that will be a force for prosperity and security in one of the most consequential regions in the world. We are vaulting our partnership directly to a comprehensive strategic partnership in Vietnam's highest tier of partnership.
The US and Vietnam now have a comprehensive strategic partnership. Earlier, they had a comprehensive partnership. It may not sound like much of a difference. Only the word strategic has been added now. But it is, in fact, a significant change. Vietnam has very few partners who are designated as strategic. The short list includes India, South Korea, Russia, and China. Notice the last two. Russia and China. Vietnam calls them strategic partners, and now it has added America to the same club. Russia and China had helped Vietnam defeat the US 50 years ago. Now they're being put on par with the Americans. It's a bold move by Hanoi. Why do you think they made it? Why would Vietnam risk angering its old friends by cozying up to an old foe? Like we said earlier, for money and protection. Listen to what they said after the deal was signed. The focus was on economics.
We're deepening our cooperation on critical emerging technologies, particularly around building more resilient semiconductor supply chains. We're expanding our economic partnership, spurring even greater trade and investment between our nations.
But they avoided talking about the elephant in the room, or should we say the dragon. When pressed on it, President Biden admitted that China played a part in this diplomatic upgrade, but he was cagey about it.
I am sincere about getting the relationship right. And one of the things that is going on now is China is beginning to change some of the rules of the game in terms of trade and other issues. That's what this trip was all about. Having India cooperate much more with the United States, be closer with the United States, Vietnam being closer with the United States. It's not about containing China. It's about having a stable base in the Indo-Pacific.
He kept insisting that the Vietnam deal was not about containing China. But let's look at the facts. The US is trying to invest in Vietnam to counter its dependency on China. Vietnam is also doing the same thing. Currently, China is their biggest import and export market. So it makes it hard for Vietnam to counter China's territorial aggression. And Vietnam is one of the many, many neighbors whose land China has tried to grab. In this case, it is the Paracel Islands. These are in the South China Sea. Vietnam says it's their territory. But China illegally took control of them a few decades ago. And recently, China has built an airstrip there. It's the same tactic that Beijing keeps using everywhere. Invade, build infrastructure, and claim that it was always theirs. So obviously, Vietnam is not happy, and deepening ties with the US is the logical choice to counter an aggressive China. Because everyone knows a good way to beat a bully is to get an even bigger bully. It's not a peck, it's an assault. That was the slogan at a protest in Madrid last week. But why were these women protesting? It's because of an incident that shook Spanish football. 3 weeks ago, Spain's women football team were on a high. They'd just won the World Cup. They wanted to celebrate it. But one moment ruined all of it. It was when Spain's Football Federation chief, Luis Rubiales, kissed player Jennifer Hermoso. It was a kiss without her consent. But for Rubiales, it was just another peck. There was backlash. There were protests. There were calls for him to resign, but Luis Rubiales remained defiant until yesterday. The Spanish football chief has finally stepped down. The story is not a new one, though. A top boss abusing his power, women slammed for complaining, and accusations of a smear campaign. We've seen it so many times since the Me Too movement 5 years ago, which is why this resignation is so important. Our next report tells you what it means for Spanish football.
The Women's Football World Cup made a lot of noise. There was record viewership, stadiums were full, fans were excited. They were rooting for their favourite teams. It wasn't about gender, it was just pure football. But just when you thought football was levelling the playing field, one moment brought it all down. Spain had just won the World Cup. The team was ecstatic. They were celebrating their historic win until this happened. That was the president of Spain's Football Federation, Luis Rubiales. He was greeting the players after their win when he kissed Spanish player Jennifer Hermoso. It was a kiss she didn't consent to, and that's all that mattered. Winning the World Cup should have been the highlight of her career, but for Hermoso and her team, it became about fighting the system. As for Rubiales, he remained defiant. He called the claims false. He painted himself as the victim of a witch hunt. He addressed a press briefing. If it wasn't in front of the eyes of millions, perhaps he would have denied that it happened at all.
Before publicly murdering me, I am going to defend myself. I am going to defend myself where any other Spaniard can do, which is in the courts. I am going to take action against these people.
So while the team should have been celebrating their victory, they were left waging a battle against their boss. Pressure started building on Rubiales. FIFA suspended him. The government called him out, but Rubiales refused to resign. His defiance was so brazen, it brought thousands to the street. They wanted him out.
All those victims who do not have a proof of the aggression, what do we have left? What do we have to expect from the system that is not going to protect us? That's why we need to go out onto the streets today.
A masculinist gender aggression that is combined with a situation of abuse of power. I think the reaction we have had, that we are making, is an example for everyone. For me as a man too.
The final whistle, it seemed a 1-0 to toxic masculinity. But the women of Spain came back to fight in extra time. At least 80 female players refused to play. The men's team continued, but they offered some solidarity. The silver lining, however, came 3 weeks later. On September 10th, Rubiales told the federation he was resigning. But even in his resignation, Rubiales remained defiant. He said he would continue his fight to clear his name. This is a big moment for Spanish football. The Football World Cup was supposed to be about equality, but the kiss showed how women were still playing on a man's pitch. It was supposed to be all about the win. Instead, it became all about this scandal. The achievements of the women were benched for the defiance and arrogance of one man. As for Spain, it goes beyond the sport. Most women have had a Rubiales story about men abusing their positions of power and getting away with it. It's happened in offices, clubs, homes, streets, and now on football pitches. Rubiales' career may well be finished, but Spain's #MeToo moment is far from over.
And this, I have to say, is not unique to Spain, unfortunately. We're wrapping the show. Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In China, strong floodwaters swept people and their belongings away. In Chile, a CCTV footage captured the exact moment when a 6.4 magnitude earthquake struck the country, and surfing dogs are making quite a splash at a charity surfathon in the United States. You don't want to miss this. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 2001, nearly 3,000 people were killed after 4 planes were hijacked by Al-Qaeda terrorists. 2 planes flew into the World Trade Center's Twin Towers in New York. The Twin Towers collapsed after a short while. Another plane crashed into the Pentagon. The attacks triggered America's global war on terror, including the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Big breaking news coming in from the Asia Cup, ladies and gentlemen. India has beaten Pakistan by 228 runs, a mammoth defeat for Pakistan at the hands of the boys in blue, ladies and gentlemen. Virat Kohli and KL Rahul's century, a fifer from Kuldeep, and India has beaten Pakistan by 228 runs. I'm joined by my colleague Shivani Gupta on the broadcast. Shivani, a huge win for India. So much rain delay, but finally the match is over and India has defeated Pakistan by a mammoth 228 runs.
Absolutely. This was a match that obviously suffered a lot of stops and starts because of the weather that is prevailing in Sri Lanka. But ultimately, there was a full match and a full end and a result. And it couldn't have come as a better result for India because, particularly in a batting lineup, there have been some troubles as far as some returning from injury, others being a little bit out of form. And there are a lot of questions for the batting lineup going up into the World Cup. And this tournament is a preparation for the upcoming World Cup in India. If anything, KL Rahul's century today, kind of makes it a problem of plenty for the Indian selectors. Remember, there's a Nishan Kishan also who's done extremely well in the format. So there will be a problem of plenty from this. KL Rahul smashing a ton today along with Virat Kohli. While those are all good signs, it kind of puts pressure on the Indian team management for the playing 11. But overall, given that in the last India-Pakistan match, which obviously did not yield in a result, the Indian batting lineup was looking a little bit troubled by the Pakistani bowling lineup. This time around, though, the Indians were really in at their A game and on top of it. And some of the shots that they were playing and some of the confidence that they were displaying would really hold them in good stead ahead of the rest of the matches and, of course, the World Cup.
Absolutely. The match concluded when the Indian batting lineup was at its A game, as you're pointing out, Shivani. Also, this is India's biggest win margin against Pakistan in ODI history. Right, I think we've lost Shivani over there. But ladies and gentlemen, this big piece of breaking news coming in from the Asia Cup where India has beaten Pakistan by 228 runs. You remember, Virat Kohli and KL Rahul hit that century, 5 wickets hauled by Kuldeep. This is India's biggest win margin against Pakistan in ODI history. This is the Asia Cup match in Colombo. Remember, we saw so much rain delay taking place around this match, but India has beaten Pakistan by a mammoth 228 runs, ladies and gentlemen. Virat Kohli, KL Rahul hitting those tons, smashing the ball of the Pakistan bowling lineup, and also Kuldeep taking the haul of 5 wickets. This is India, as I was pointing out, biggest win margin against Pakistan in ODI history. Remember, when the Indian batting lineup was crumbling before the Pakistani bowlers, the rain delay came in and the match got postponed. But now the match has concluded where India definitively beating Pakistan by 228 runs. Shivani is back with us on the broadcast. Shivani, when it comes to setting records, is this margin of victory over Pakistan, has India set a record when it comes to ODIs? Right, we'll try to reconnect with Shivani over there, but a huge victory for the boys in blue, ladies and gentlemen, where India has beaten Pakistan by 228 runs. This is the victory coming in from Colombo. But let's shift focus now. A new twist has been added into the entire Sanatana Dharma row, ladies and gentlemen. Now, another DMK minister, K. Pon Modi, has stoked another row with his remarks, and he has created a lot of trouble for the India Alliance members. He has said, and I quote, "The India Alliance has been formed to fight against the principles of Sanatan Dharma. We may have our differences among us, but the 26 parties in the alliance are united in the fight against Sanatan Dharma, but we need political power for that." So that is the pitch coming in from K. Pon Modi, who is a DMK leader over here, and he has said that the formation of the India Alliance, the formation of the anti-Modi alliance that has been given the name the India Alliance, has been formed to take on Sanatan Dharma, creating more problem for the DMK's alliance members in the entire India bloc. Let's listen into what he had to say.
பத்திரிகைகளின் மூலமாக